Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sprint 242 review. This was a normal 2-week sprint. Let's get started. I'll start with the overview, Gilbert on the UI, Adam on providers, and Joe on the platform. As you can see, this was a relatively normal sprint with 62 PRs merged this sprint. And they're relatively evenly split between bugs, enhancements, and a smattering of others. And over to Gilbert on the UI.
So these are a bunch of the UI fixes and enhancements we had. I'll be going into some of them on the next slides. So the first one was enhancement or a bug fix I did to fix the automation fields before the tag control and the array fields were not being displayed properly on the request page. So I was able to fix that. Next slide. Samuel added an enhancement to display annotation data for various providers on the summary pages. Next slide. And then these are some of the other fixes we had. So we had, I fixed the automate specs. That was a bug fix. An enhancement by Joe was Rails 7 compatible changes. And then we had various other package changes and security updates as well. That's it for the UI. Next is Adam.
Thanks, Gilbert. For this sprint for Flow, Keenan added validation for the next field in an error catcher, making sure that you're not trying to transition to a state that doesn't exist. He also added spec support requires and moved a bunch of spec helpers into individual files there. I moved the parselet parsing for intrinsic functions into the initializer so that we can catch errors with the intrinsic function definitions on load as opposed to at runtime. Keenan changed wait to delay from when the method finishes as opposed to when the method starts. In case the method took a while, it could not potentially not wait at all if it took the duration of the wait period specified. I also fixed a sporadic test failure with the wait state. The test was specifying 1 second, and sometimes on slow GitHub Action runners, it would take about that time, so it would not actually wait, causing a sporadic failure. For workflow examples, Jason added a provision with Ansible example using embedded Ansible, and Keenan fixed a bug with the email built-in method. It was using title as opposed to subject for the argument. Next slide. Amazon, as always, has updated instance types, and for AWX, we fixed a bug where the configuration script class name was resolving to AWX, which was causing failures for the subclass Ansible Tower provider, since it was seeing the AWX class as opposed to its home class. So we got that fixed up, and we should be able to clean up some extra code in the Ansible Tower class in the upcoming sprint. For embedded Terraform, Gilbert fixed a bug with the template name. It was very complicated, had a bunch of extra information in it that was not necessary and part of the repository itself and didn't need to be in the name, so it's just the path name now. He also fixed the credential type text for some of the credentials, and we fixed an issue with the marshaling of a Boolean environment variable on Kubernetes. It was blowing up since it was trying to serialize a Boolean when it was expecting a string. Next slide. For Kubernetes, Jason changed the drop-down label for KubeVirt to indicate that it's the same as OpenShift virtualization. And Samuel added annotations to the container summary pages. So he, on the Kubernetes and OpenShift side, pulled them from a bunch of different properties, including containers and container nodes and pods. For KubeVirt, I added service catalog support. We already had provisioning, and so service catalog was basically a 2-line change to get that pulled in. So it was nice to see. Did a quick little test to make sure the catalog shows up, and does a nice enhancement to the KubeVirt provider. We also fixed a bug with Fog KubeVirt that was failing on Ruby 3 due to a keyword argument issue. And finally, for VMware, we added support for the recently released 8.0 Update 3. And if for whatever reason connecting to the CIS API endpoint fails, where we get things like OVF files and tags and labels. It was failing the entire refresh when it's just as well to continue the refresh and just not get a couple of those extra items in case there's an issue with the CIS endpoint on that particular vCenter. And that is it for providers. Over to Joe.
Thanks, Adam. For platform enhancements, as Adam mentioned, Samuel added the model side for the annotations for custom attributes on the container models. Keenan added a Rails console methods for faking the starting of the UI workers, which was needed for Automate and for running VMware refresh monitoring. Nassar added appliance console messaging, hostname validation. He also clarified that the appliance console messaging disk step is optional. Jason added a security test suite for running Yarn NPM audit. This behaves similarly to the existing bundler audit, but for JavaScript. I changed our default value 4 dependency to use the new 4.0.0 release with support for Rails 7 and newer. And I changed some of our application boot code and initializers to not rely on autoload and instead use require, as Rails 7 autoloads differently. So it's better not to autoload if we don't need to, since this code can't be reloaded anyway. And Jason bumped schema to use the minimum version of the ManageIQ style. Next slide. For platform bugs, Brandon changed container HTTPD to not install weak dependencies, one of which had a CVE against it. Nassar changed the appliance console to validate the messaging key stored password contains only acceptable characters, as the Java key store had some limitations we had to work around. Keenan fixed bin console by doing the proper code requires and setup on virtual attributes so that you can use it to develop and test things. Jason fixed the MIQ XML's byte order marker handling code after the release of RxML 3.3.2 broke our tests. Next, Keenan cleaned up some of our conditional code around checking supports and setting the unsupported reason. Keenan also fixed some tests that previously used formatted strings to instead use the MIQ expressions they were meant to represent. And I fixed a minor Rails 7 deprecation, calling the name method on an active support time zone object. And for Rails 7, also, I made a second attempt to avoid loading the settings change model too early. Next slide.
And that's all for our Sprint 242 review. The next Sprint review, 243, is on August 7th at the usual place and time. And I'd like to thank all the presenters today, all the contributors to ManageIQ, and our community. Thanks, everyone.